Welcome to Deep Thought. So much in the underworld. You know what? And what do I mean by underworld? I don't necessarily mean like, people who follow me on my men's channel know. Well, I haven't talked about it as much recently, but the sexual shadow world. I'm not even talking about that. That's a whole separate conversation right there. But somebody, when I say underworld, what is not presented, what's not presented in the mainstream news. That's why I say always dig deep, because if you look at the news, if you look at television, what's mostly presented is the surface world, or, the people, they get together, they work, they get nice things, have a nice house, have a nice family, all of that, which of course in itself promotes the products and services of people providing that, who in turn is feeding the millionaires and the billionaires, right? They promote that, but it's not so much of a promotion of the underworld, which, let's just be real, there's a lot of dysfunction, but it's still there. And I was thinking about that because a channel that I check out every now and then is called Soft Underbelly. I think I've talked about it here before. And what the gentleman who runs that channel, and I think they got like several million subs, I don't know, but they got a lot. He will talk to drug users, prostitutes, tricks, pimps. They'll have an occasional, like, more mainstream type of person on there, maybe a psychologist or something. But it really is a soft underbelly. It's the parts that you don't see. They're not talking about this rarely on mainstream media. They might talk about drug use every now and then, but then it's another story, like opiates. They've talked about it in mainstream media before, but now you don't hear about it. You got to look up information. It's still a very bad thing. When I was in the hospital, there was a guy in his 70s who had overdosed on opiates, and he was loud. I'm glad he wasn't in the room with me. He was loud. You could hear him down the hall. I don't know what they ultimately did with him, but he was going through something. But you got a lot of people going through that thing. Because when you talk about the underworld, you're talking, first of all, sex workers. Like when I talk about the sexual shadow world, when I talk about the shadow world, it's more or less about, people getting involved in stuff like BDSM and, how they expressing themselves, their true sexual selves sexually. And that, like I say, that's a separate conversation. But if you look at the sex workers, the prostitutes, pimps, and it's not like all flashy on TV. I've personally known some pimps. I've known women who, they would be called renegades because they didn't really have a pimp. And I've seen a lot, known some drug users. I remember worked with some, and they would just tell me, say, hey, I remember this one drug user, he told me, he said, I can go in any town, any place, and I can find the drugs. I know how to look. And that's an underworld thing, In fact, there's an economic system called System D. System D. I'm gonna put a link for System D too. That's like, wait a minute. Let me just write that down, make sure I put it. But System D is it's a global economy. There's a lot of stuff that's not sold in stores. It's really sold maybe on the streets, vending markets. It's the underground economy and whatever's there. Some bad things too. I don't even want to mention it. Some bad things are there too, but it still exists. That's part of the underworld. It's so much. See, you have two worlds really. You have the mainstream world. That's where we're supposed to, like I said, get a nice house, get married, have a family, everything's all fun, all of that. But then there's the underworld where there are the drug users, there are the sex workers, and there's so many different versions of sex workers. Unfortunately, there's stuff like trafficking, human trafficking, and all of that. Like I said, you can argue all of it's bad because it's not mainstream, but it's still happening. Like how many people, like the drug use thing, how many people might, on the surface, they might have that big home, They might have that nice car. They might have that six-figure job, but they're using drugs. They're using illegal drugs. That's underworld, you know, and some of them can get addicted. I remember when I was working retail, and just where I was, we had a lot of people who were from upper middle class backgrounds who were working there, but they were really they were only working there because that was part of their drug rehab. They were actually staying at a drug home. They weren't native to the area. They were from other places, but they were staying in a house, and they had to pay. They had to pay. In fact, I remember one of them, he was in a house, and he said he had been in a rehab with, I would say, a semi-famous movie star. But that's what's happening. What's happening behind, in the dark, behind closed doors and everything. It's so much, and I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying it's there. Like I said, check out the links I have about System D. Check out the links I have about the soft white underbelly to, you know, that page. Go through there, and all of a sudden you're like, damn, there's so much out here. And it's people you might see, it's not flashy, it's not what they might show on TV, which, like I said, is propaganda, but it's still there. And you start thinking about it, you'd be like, wow, you know? Like the relationship thing, it's so much that goes on there. Like I said, that the shadow world, that's a whole other conversation. But you look at sex workers, though, like professional sex workers. I mean, you know, Master Teacher BGS would call them diesel women, because they want something just totally different. Think about any woman who, you know, they could be working for a pimp, they could be working for themselves, who they just using a man just for money. Just for money. And it's not always who you think it might be. But that's still like a more of an underground thing, because, you know, a woman's supposed to be looking for a husband, or even a man doing that. They supposed to be looking for a regular mate or something, but they might say, look, no, I'm just gonna get that money. You know, they gonna get that money. They doing some stuff that, you know, is technically against the law in some places. Like gigolos. Gigolos, that's really more, there's more of an underworld aspect to it, even though they advertise publicly. But they get away with it because they say, oh no, we're not charging for sex, we're charging for time. If we have sex, we just happen to have sex. Yeah, okay. Anyway, but you get some people in the underworld, shoot, that might be what they're doing. They might be low level and stuff. You know, they ain't spectacular where, you know, they might have some like TV show or movie talking about it, but, you know, where that's how they living. They just getting the money. You got some people, like some women, especially in some poor neighborhoods, you know, and you might see some guy coming through, and it's like, wait a minute, he don't belong around here, but he's paying for everything. She's a sugar baby, you know? And, you know, or drug users. Think about drug users. They totally underground. They're using something illegal. And unfortunately, but their surface world jobs, they might look more mainstream. They might look more mainstream, however you want to take that. But it's interesting. It's interesting when you think it's so much more out there. And the thing is, like I said earlier, it's something to pay attention to. You need to pay attention because they're still affecting things. You know, that underground is still affecting everything around you, whether you know it or not. You never know if you're dealing with someone who's active in that underground for business, for relationships, for whatever. And you don't know how it could affect you because people die there too. So I want y'all really think about that. There's just so much in the underworld, all right? So anyway, that's all I have for now. I'll get back with y'all. Well, y'all have a great weekend, and I'll talk to y'all. Peace.